This is the Kailh BCP, another take on the Black Cherry Pie Frankenswitch that was so popular during the time the keyboard hobby was really booming during the pandemic. Shout out to Unikeys, they didn't sponsor this video and I actually paid for my batch of Kailh BCPs from them, but they're a great vendor with a unique selection of switches, so I highly recommend checking their store out. Kailh is the manufacturer of the novelty cream switches, which was what the original BCP Frankenswitch used back in the day. At some point, cream switches got a new stem mold and no longer fit the cherry top housings, so people started using other long pole stems in order to replicate the sound and feel of the BCP. So Kailh's version of the BCP is a bit different than the original Frankenswitch. The Frankenswitch being made of a JWK H1 bottom, cherry top housing, and the cream stem, which in its most basic form was a nylon top and bottom with a palm stem. So Kailh tried to replicate this with a nylon housing and the original cream stem. Although the housings are the same material, they most likely have a different percentage or ratio of nylon in their housings compared to the H1 bottom or the cherry top housings. So the sound can differ a little bit from the original Frankenswitch, as we've also seen in the Beeson BCP, which sounded very different from the original Frankenswitch. Aside from the housing materials, the travel distance is also different in the Kailh BCP. The Kailh BCP has a total travel distance of 3.5mm, while the original BCP was around 3.1mm. So besides all of that, are these good switches? I didn't experience any leaf ticking or spring ping with mine. Actually, I kinda do hear some ticking after lubing them and reviewing the sound test while editing, but I don't think I heard it in any of my sound tests when they were still stock. I'm not sure what happened, but see if you can pick up the difference in the sound test between the stock and lubed sound tests. Honestly, I can't hear the leaf ticking when I'm typing normally, whereas I'm pressing kinda hard in the comparison test between the Penyus and my BCPs. And the housings aren't super tight, as you can see a tiny bit of wiggle room here, but I don't think filming this is really necessary. Sometimes when the housing is loose like this, it can introduce some extra ticking noise. I tried filming these with Desky films and 0.15mm TX films, but half the time the switch felt tactile after filming, unfortunately. The factory lube job is very minimal, and I found it to be pretty inconsistent with my batch, as some switches are noticeably smoother than others. There's also a bit of scratch, which is kinda reminiscent of the cream switches, but definitely not as loud or noticeable. It's noticeable if you don't want to lube it, but not loud, I would say. I don't mind it too much personally, so I'm just going to do a light coat on the stem and the rails with Tribosys 3203, just to make the smoothness more consistent. So how does it compare to the original? I made some BCPs a long time ago. Although they don't have the H1 bottoms, they have a JWK nylon bottom from the EV02 switches. While not the same switch, a lot of JWK switches sounded really similar with their nylon bottoms back then, so I can't say I technically have the OG BCPs, but I have something pretty close, I assume. I also have the Penyus switches, which are switches inspired by the BCP Frankenswitch, and they're supposed to sound very similar. Overall, the sound kinda leans towards a lower pitch, with it being higher pitched or clackier than the Zaku's or Beeson Roselles. So on the spectrum of thocky to clacky, you could say it's in the middle. So, here's the sound tests. Thanks for watching.